Late on the afternoon of Saturday, March 25th, 1911, the 500 employees of the Triangle Shirtwaist Company were racing to fill their quotas. Teenage girls, for the most part, eager to finish up, collect their pay, and plunge into the mild spring evening. Around 4:45 p.m., with just 15 minutes left in the workday, someone on the 8th floor must have dropped a match or burning cigarette into the heaps of discarded fabric that littered the shop floor. Within seconds, the combustible litter of cloth and tissue paper had burst into flames, and before anyone could stop it, the fire began to spread with startling speed from one stack of fabric to another, as cries of panic went out and terrified workers scrambled for the exits.
I heard somebody cry fire. I ran for the door on the Washington Place side. But the door was locked, and immediately there was a great jam of girls before it. Some girls were screaming. Some were beating the door with their fists. Some were trying to tear it open. Rosie Safran.
Most workers on the 10th floor managed to escape, helped to safety across an adjoining rooftop by students from New York University. Hundreds more made it down by elevator, 30 people at a time, jammed into cars meant to hold half that number. But by 4:55, the searing heat had forced the last of the elevators out of service. And with the fire now spreading from the 8th floor to the 9th, nearly 200 women remained trapped in the building with no means of escape. On the 8th floor, workers tried bravely to stop the fire, but the flames were too quick, and the water pressure in the fire hoses failed them. As the searing heat and smoke intensified, the factory floor became an incinerator. And as bodies piled up in front of the locked main exit, those who still could raced for a fire escape on the far western end of the building. Fewer than 20 women managed to get out before the rusted metal supports gave way, sending several workers plunging to their death and cutting off the last means of escape for all the others. With a wall of fire advancing on them, the terrified women moved to the open windows.
The girls behind us were screaming and crying. Several of them, as the flames crept closer, ran into the smoke, and we heard them scream as the flames cut their clothes. One little girl, who worked at the machine opposite me, cried out in Italian, "Goodbye. Goodbye. Tessa Banani."
Outside on the street below, a huge crowd had gathered. The New York Fire Department had arrived within minutes of the call, rushing 35 vehicles to the scene, along with the most modern firefighting equipment in the country. But even the tallest ladder could go no farther than the 6th floor, 2 full stories below the burning factory floors, where tongues of flame could already be seen curling out of the windows. By now, dozens of women at a time could be seen standing at the 8th and 9th floor windows, all but engulfed by the inferno. As those below watched in horror, groups of women, 3 and 4 at a time, grabbed each other by the hand, closed their eyes, and plunged off the building. They hit the pavement just like rain, a stunned fire chief named Edward Worth later testified. Frances Perkins, a 31-year-old advocate with the Consumers League, stood with her hand at her throat, helpless to stop the unfolding tragedy.
The nets were broken. The firemen kept shouting for them not to jump. But they had no choice. The flames were right behind them. For by this time, the fire was far gone. Francis Perkins.
By 5:15, the scene on the street was a bedlam, as thousands of workers poured out of nearby factories and pressed against the barricades. Fire engine horses reared at the strong smell of blood, while police tried without success to control the crowd.
The floods of water from the fireman's hose that ran into the gutter were actually stained red with blood. I looked upon the heap of dead bodies, and I remembered these girls were shirtwaist makers. I remembered their great strike of last year, in which these same girls had demanded more sanitary conditions and more safety precautions in these shops. These dead bodies were the answer.